There's a man building a weaponized fence. Right now. He's armed. I think he has wolves. That was the 911 call that came through dispatch on a Tuesday morning, and it might have sounded like a real emergency if the armed man hadn't been me, and the weaponized fence wasn't a 10-foot line of wooden posts meant to keep my sheep from wandering into the creek. I didn't even know about the call until Deputy Torres pulled up in his cruiser, leaned out the window, and said, "You won't believe this one, Sheriff." At first, I thought he was joking, but then I saw her. Karen Whitlow. Standing at the far end of the gravel road like she was scouting for a home inspection reality show, sunglasses too big for her face and a laminated clipboard in hand like it was a badge. I didn't need to ask why she was here. She looked like every warning sign I'd ever ignored. I'd seen her a few times before, always peeking from behind the bushes near the edge of my property, always clutching a phone like it was a detonator. Ever since she moved into that overpriced equestrian community half a mile down the road, she'd been determined to fix everything wrong with the countryside. That included my working farm, my fencing, and apparently now, my livestock. She marched up to my property line without so much as a hello and pointed her clipboard at the fence I was repairing. "You can't build that," she said. "It violates community regulations. You're over the maximum height limit for perimeter fencing." I stared at her. Then I looked at the cedar post I had just set in cement. Then back at her. I didn't say a word. I just turned my wrench one more time. Karen puffed up like a parrot. "Sir, I'm going to have to report this. There are children nearby. And this sort of hostile structure sends the wrong message to the community. It looks threatening." I blinked at her. My farm was surrounded by open fields, a patch of woods, and a dried-out pond that hadn't held more than 2 inches of water since the last thunderstorm. No swing sets, no tricycles, no chalk drawings. Just my sheep, my barn, and my peace. Or what used to be peace. Karen took a photo of the fence with her phone, then turned and stomped back to her vehicle. I didn't hear what she said into the phone, but I saw her finger jab the air as she talked. Less than 10 minutes later, a drone hovered overhead, followed by a patrol cruiser easing its way down my drive. The drone? Probably hers. The cruiser? That's where things got funny. Deputy Torres stepped out of the vehicle with a grin already tugging at his face. He tipped his hat and walked up to me like it was a casual check-in, which it was, because he already knew what was going on. Karen came sprinting up behind him, panting like she'd just run a marathon in flip-flops. "Officer!" "Thank God. That's him." She pointed at me like she expected Torres to unholster something. "He's building an illegal structure and I have reason to believe he has dangerous animals." Torres glanced at me, then at her. "Ma'am, you said in your call the individual was armed and erecting a threatening barrier?" She nodded furiously. "Yes. I feared for my safety." That's when Torres motioned toward my hip, and Karen's eyes finally landed on the badge hanging from my belt. Her mouth opened. Then closed. Then opened again like she was buffering. I could see the moment her brain tried to reroute her tone, but it was too late. You're the sheriff?" she asked, now sounding like someone who'd just found out the man she called the cops on was the cops. I dusted off my hands, leaned one arm on the fence post, and nodded. "Yep." She blinked a few times, as if waiting for the universe to rewind and give her a do-over. "Well, I didn't know that," she stammered. "I thought you were just some rural handyman." That got a chuckle out of Torres, who stepped back and pulled out his tablet. "Just to be thorough, ma'am, I'd like to play your 911 call." Karen started to protest, but it was already playing. Her voice, sharp and theatrical, blared from the device. "He has wolves. They look trained." I couldn't help it, I laughed. "Karen, I've got sheep. And 2 old dogs who sleep more than they bark." She tried to recover by pulling a printed document out of her purse, some grainy HOA guidelines with a highlighter line drawn through. "Fence height recommendations." Torres didn't even look at it. "Ma'am, this isn't HOA-governed land. It's county. And county regulations allow for agricultural fencing up to 10 feet, especially on livestock property. The sheriff's fence is legal. Karen flushed red, like someone who realized too late that she brought a Monopoly rulebook to a courtroom. She turned on her heel and marched back to her car without another word. As she drove off in her glossy black Range Rover, tires crunching on gravel like angry footsteps, I turned to Torres. "Think that's the end of it?" He shook his head. "Not a chance. She's got HOA blood. They don't quit. They escalate." He wasn't wrong. The thing about people like Karen is that they don't learn their lesson when they're wrong, they just get more creative about being right. I went back to my fence, hammer in hand, half smiling as I pictured whatever stunt she'd pull next. But even I didn't expect how far she'd go. Because calling 911 on a sheriff was just Karen's opening move. The next morning I found a neatly folded piece of paper wedged into the side of my gate, laminated like someone was preparing for a thunderstorm of accountability. It had the HOA's letterhead at the top, though technically this land was never under any HOA jurisdiction. The note read like a formal cease and desist, full of empty legalese and vague threats about non-compliance with visual harmony codes and unauthorized perimeter expansion. I read it twice, then laughed hard enough to wake up the rooster, who gave me a dirty look and went back inside the coop. I'd been dealing with real problems for decades: rattlesnakes in boots, drunk hunters firing rifles into the air, even the occasional escaped bull. This was performance theater, and Karen was the lead actress with a clipboard. Around noon, I saw her again. This time she brought backup, 3 HOA board members, all dressed like they were on the cover of a magazine titled Passive Aggression Monthly. They parked their spotless SUVs on the gravel just outside the boundary, like they didn't want the tires to get offended by real dirt. One of the men, wearing loafers and a tucked-in polo shirt, waved at me with the confidence of someone about to ruin someone's day. "We're here to discuss your noncompliance," he announced. I kept hammering my fence post. "Which noncompliance?" I asked, without looking up. Karen stepped forward, clutching her clipboard like a weapon. "Your fence height. And the color. And the aggressive architectural posture of your structure." That one made me pause. "Architectural posture?" I echoed, turning toward her. "You mean upright?" She didn't flinch. "Yes. It creates a psychological barrier for the neighborhood." At that moment, I almost invited them in for lemonade just to watch them squirm, but I figured they wouldn't come any closer than the roadside. I simply replied, "Well, this psychological barrier keeps coyotes out. So unless your neighborhood wants free-range sheep crossing your driveways, I'd let it be." That didn't sit well. One of the HOA board members pulled out his phone, started recording, and declared, "You're being documented for obstruction and disregard of community expectations." I said nothing. I just opened the side gate and whistled. 2 of my Great Pyrenees lumbered out, massive white dogs with thick coats and slow, confident steps. They looked like walking clouds with teeth. The HOA brigade jumped back like someone had turned a hose on them. Karen shouted, "Those are the wolves! He admitted it!" They bolted faster than they arrived, nearly clipping a fence post in their rush to retreat. I gave the dogs a biscuit and shook my head. If they thought that was going to stop me from living in peace, they were in for a long ride. The next stunt came barely 48 hours later. This time, I had a knock at the gate. Animal control. A tired-looking officer named Denise with a badge, clipboard, and a sigh already forming on her lips. "Sheriff Dalton?" she asked. I nodded. "You've got a complaint filed against you for harboring unlicensed predatory animals near residential zones. Mind if I take a look?" I invited her in, walked her through the pens, showed her my livestock registration, my fencing specs, the vet records for the dogs, and the printed ordinance that clearly stated livestock guardian dogs were permitted and encouraged on agricultural land. She walked, took notes, and eventually laughed. "Honestly, I wish more folks were this squared away," she said. "The last guy had a literal llama in his kitchen." I asked who filed the complaint. She shrugged. "It was anonymous." But it came with a hand-drawn map that had the words Danger Zone scrawled in red glitter ink. Take a wild guess. I didn't need to. Denise left with a friendly wave, and I sat on my porch wondering how someone like Karen had the time to escalate a situation that didn't concern her. That night, I checked the security feed, mostly trail cameras set up around the barn and gate. Nothing yet. But I had a gut feeling she wasn't done. Folks like her never stopped at a simple loss. They regrouped, recharged their pettiness, and came back twice as annoying. Sure enough, the following Saturday, there was a farmers' market event held downtown. I drove in to pick up some local honey and check in with a few folks from the department who were providing light security. And that's when I saw her. Karen, standing near the community bulletin board, surrounded by a half-circle of people while dramatically pointing at a printout of my property on her clipboard. I wasn't close enough to hear it all, but I caught phrases like corruption in rural offices, abuse of position, and unauthorized fence militarization. She said it like she was pitching a scandal for a news special. Someone noticed me and nudged her. When she turned and saw me watching, her expression faltered, just for a moment, but then she squared her shoulders and kept going. Even if he's the sheriff, that doesn't mean he gets to violate community standards, she said loudly, hoping to catch sympathy. One man in the group raised a hand and asked, "Wait, what's he actually done?" Karen sputtered. "It's not about one thing, it's the principle." That's when another man muttered, "Seems like you just don't like fences." A few snickers spread through the group. Someone else pulled out their phone and started recording. Karen raised her voice. "I'm trying to protect this town from being turned into a barbed wire disaster." I just leaned against a lamppost and watched her spin herself deeper into her own hole. A local teenager uploaded the clip later that evening. The video title? Karen vs. Sheriff, The Fence Wars. It got 40,000 views in 2 hours. Comment sections were filled with people asking if it was satire. My favorite was, "Did she think she could outcop the actual sheriff?" Back at the farm, everything was calm. I made myself a coffee, sat on the porch with my boots kicked up, and watched the sun roll down across the fields. The sheep grazed quietly. The dogs snoozed. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew we weren't at the end of this rodeo yet. Karen wasn't going to back down. She had too much pride, too little sense, and an unlimited supply of printer ink. The next play wouldn't be a complaint or a drone. It'd be something sneakier. Something that made her feel powerful. And I was ready for it. It started with a piece of paper taped to my front gate. Not a flyer, not a warning, not anything from the county. It was a fake notice. A laminated sheet with a seal that looked official enough to fool someone who didn't know better, stamped with bold red letters. Code violation, immediate compliance required. I pulled it off and examined the fine print. The form cited obscure ordinances, misquoted building codes, and was signed at the bottom by someone named J. Michaels. Funny thing was, J. Michaels retired 5 years ago. I knew because I attended his going-away barbecue. And the seal? It was outdated, wrong color, wrong year, and misspelled. Inspections. The whole thing was a sad attempt at a scare tactic, but it did confirm something I already suspected. Karen wasn't just making noise. She was trying to trap me. Instead of tearing the fake notice up, I set it aside and walked around the fence line. That's when I noticed something else. A few of the fence posts I'd installed the week prior were tampered with. The bolts weren't just loose, they were almost fully removed, like someone wanted them to fall over with the next gust of wind. 2 of the bottom rails were deliberately cracked, not from wear or livestock pressure, but with a crowbar or similar leverage. It was sloppy, but intentional. I checked the gate's trail cam footage. I had set up 3 wireless cameras after the first 911 call, just to keep things safe. The footage was grainy due to the fog, but at 2:17 a.m., 2 figures appeared at the edge of the property line. One tall, one smaller. The taller one stayed at the road, while the other crept toward the gate and started fiddling. A voice whispered, "This one's loose. We can make it look like it's falling apart." Then the other voice, unmistakably Karen's, replied, "Good. Get some shots for the report. If we do this right, we can force a takedown order." I paused the footage and stared at the screen. She actually said it? She was planning to fake code violations and stage photos to make it look like I was running a dangerous structure. That would be petty enough, but to actually damage my fencing? That was criminal trespass and tampering. I downloaded the footage, saved it on 2 drives, and texted Deputy Torres. "You're going to love this one. Bring popcorn." He showed up by late morning. I played the footage for him. He didn't say anything at first, just crossed his arms and watched. When the sound clip played, he let out a low whistle. "She just walked herself into a felony," he said, then cracked a grin. "Think she'll enjoy her 15 minutes of infamy?" I shrugged. "Not as much as I'll enjoy the town hall meeting." We didn't move on her immediately. That would have been too clean. Too forgettable. I wanted it to stick, not just in the legal system, but in public memory. So we waited. 3 days later, the monthly community town hall rolled around. It wasn't a big event, some announcements, a few neighborly gripes, and cheap cookies on folding tables. But the attendance had been growing ever since Karen decided to turn her personal feud into a public crusade. She showed up early, carrying her clipboard, files, and that smug expression that said she was about to put someone in their place. She took a seat right in front of the mic, probably expecting to be called up for some heroic update. When I arrived with Deputy Torres, the room buzzed. People knew something was up. A couple neighbors nodded toward me, smiling like they'd heard rumors and hoped they were true. I waited until the HOA president wrapped up his segment on tree maintenance, then stepped forward and asked for a moment to address a recent issue. Karen perked up like a prairie dog spotting a hawk. She smoothed her blouse and adjusted her chair, assuming she was about to be thanked for her tireless efforts. I didn't say much. Just plugged in a USB stick, turned toward the projector, and hit play. The room darkened slightly as the footage rolled, 2 shadowy figures, one crouching near my fence, the other whispering commands. The sound clip played clearly, and Karen's voice echoed across the room. "If we do this right, we can force a takedown order." You could hear a pin drop after that. Karen's eyes widened. Her hand reached slowly toward her bag, like she was searching for a fire escape. I let the footage finish. Then I said calmly, "This is a felony under county law, tampering with agricultural infrastructure, false reporting, and impersonating a regulatory authority." The HOA president turned to her, jaw tight. "Karen, did you really?" But she stood up before he could finish. "This is ridiculous. That footage could be anything. You can't prove it was me." But the room had already made up its mind. Her voice had been crystal clear. A teenager in the back whispered, "She really said force a takedown, huh?" And the phrase started echoing from one seat to another. People pulled out their phones. Someone was already uploading the footage online. Karen bolted, mumbling something about slander and legal action as she stormed out of the room. The meeting ended in a blur. People gathered around, asking questions, laughing, shaking their heads. Deputy Torres gave a short statement, confirming that the sheriff's fence was legal and that further legal action was being pursued against those who tampered with private property. I didn't gloat. Didn't smile. Just stood there, hands in my jacket pockets, letting the silence of realization hang in the air. The people could decide what came next. Karen disappeared for a few days after that. No drone. No clipboard. No late-night complaints. The Range Rover stayed parked in her driveway like a sulking child. But she wasn't off the hook. The county's legal team had reviewed the footage, cross-checked the metadata, and had already pulled up records of a similar false complaint she filed in another neighborhood before moving here. They were building a case. And the best part? I didn't have to lift a finger. Her pride had done the heavy lifting. Torres texted me later that night. Just 3 words. "Boomerang in flight." I laughed, leaned back on my porch, and looked out over the fields. The dogs were sleeping under the stars, the sheep were bedded down near the barn, and my fence? Still standing, still upright, still unbothered. Just like me. But I knew there was one chapter left in this story. The part where the boomerang actually hit. And oh, it was coming fast. The papers were delivered early in the morning, tucked neatly into a manila envelope that landed with a soft thud on Karen's porch. Inside were formal charges: criminal trespassing, filing a false report, tampering with agricultural infrastructure, and impersonation of a county inspector. The warrant for her associate had already been served 2 days earlier, and he'd folded like a lawn chair in a thunderstorm. By the time Karen opened that envelope, the county knew everything: the staged photos, the fake notice, even the glittery maps she used to mark her so-called evidence. Her name had gone from gossip in coffee shops to front-page news, and there was no climbing out of it now. Not with the footage. Not with the recordings. And definitely not with the smug speech she gave at the town hall that had already gone viral with the title, "Karen Tries to Frame a Sheriff, Ends Up Framing Herself." By midweek, the story had hit the regional news circuit. The local anchor introduced it with a smirk barely hidden behind professional restraint. Tonight, a sheriff's fence becomes the center of an escalating feud that ends in criminal charges. And yes, it involves a Karen. They played the footage. Her voice rang out over the airwaves, and the image of her pointing at my gate like it was a battlefield flag was plastered across every news segment. Online, the memes spread fast. Someone edited her into a courtroom yelling at a fence. Another superimposed her face onto a medieval painting, shouting, "This is not aesthetic compliance!" It wasn't just a legal loss. It was a public reckoning. The HOA board scrambled to distance themselves. 2 members resigned within days, claiming they'd been misled by Karen and never endorsed her behavior. One of them even left a handwritten apology note in my mailbox. It was short but sincere. "We didn't know she was this far gone. Sorry you had to deal with that." I didn't respond. Didn't need to. Their silence was apology enough. The community had seen it all now: the tantrums, the lies, the desperate attempts to weaponize bureaucracy against someone she didn't like. And once exposed, Karen's influence vanished like a firework in the rain. Deputy Torres told me the court process would be straightforward. Her associate had already taken a plea deal in exchange for testimony, and the evidence trail was solid. Karen, ever defiant, had hired an out-of-town lawyer known for flashy stunts and courtroom dramatics. That didn't worry me. Facts beat theatrics. And besides, the judge assigned to the case was an old rancher who wore boots under his robe and once told a guy to apologize to that cow and get out of my sight. Torres and I chuckled at the thought of Karen trying to explain the concept of psychological fence posture to him. I didn't attend the arraignment. Didn't need to. But I heard about it. The courtroom was packed. Locals had shown up just to watch, treating it like community theater. Karen arrived overdressed in a pastel blazer, trying to look innocent and dignified. The prosecutor laid out the facts with surgical calm: the false reports, the tampering, the evidence of intent. Karen's lawyer tried to pivot the story into a concerned citizen wrongly silenced. But the judge wasn't buying it. At one point, he interrupted with, "So you're telling me she thought the sheriff was a threat because his fence was too well built?" The gallery laughed. Karen didn't. Sentencing would take time, but the damage to her image was already irreversible. Her real punishment wasn't going to be a fine or community service. It was the way people looked at her now. Avoided her at the store. Crossed the street when she appeared. She'd spent months trying to make herself the face of order, of standards, of righteousness. Now, she was the face of petty control gone wrong. And it stuck to her like mud after a rain. A week later, I was back at the fence, tightening a few bolts, making sure everything was solid. That same fence she had sworn was some kind of monstrosity. That same fence she tried to tear down with lies and glittery paperwork. It stood quiet, sturdy, doing its job like it always had. A truck rolled up slow on the gravel, and I turned, half expecting another agency or complaint. But it was a young man, new to the area, wearing jeans and a ball cap. He got out, walked over, and extended a hand. You're Sheriff Dalton, right? I nodded. Heard about the fence stuff. Just wanted to say, hell of a way to hold the line. I chuckled and shook his hand. Sometimes the fence isn't the problem. It's who's screaming at it. He laughed, thanked me, and drove off. The sun was just starting to set, casting long shadows over the pasture, lighting the wood with a warm glow. My dogs barked once from the porch, then settled back into their watchful nap. Everything was still. Everything was peaceful. And for the first time in weeks, there was no buzzing drone in the sky. No HOA letters. No shouts from across the road. Just quiet. Earned quiet. Later that evening, as I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, Torres sent me one last clip. It was security footage from town. Karen, at the community board, pulling down her last remaining flyers. Alone. No audience. No clipboard brigade. Just her, muttering under her breath, trying to erase the evidence of her campaign. But it didn't matter. People remembered. Not just what she did, but how calmly, how patiently, she'd been outclassed. I took a sip of my coffee and looked at the fence one more time. It hadn't changed. Same wood, same rails, same purpose. The only thing different was that now, the whole county knew what it represented. Not division. Not defiance. Just boundaries. Simple, solid boundaries. And the reminder that when someone crosses them with bad intent, there's still law and order on the other side.